We'd like to thank you for meeting with us today. This is the junior and senior class of Mount Madonna School. And we have some questions prepared for you, but if you have anything you want to say to us first, that would be lovely.
Well, you've picked an interesting time to be in your nation's capital. You may have noticed there's some weird things going on. And having an opportunity to use this as you're concluding your academic year, to be able to talk to some of the men and women here, to look at it up close and personal, to talk to the certified smart people who actually run the offices, like Lena in my office, Paul that you talked to, is also, I think, extraordinarily valuable. I do talk for a living, so I can go on at great length, but I would prefer to just launch in. If you have observations or questions or some way you want to guide it, we'll just try and cover as much ground as you have. And if I get bored with your questions, I'll just go off with my own answers.
Hello, I'm Holden. In an interview with New Urbanism, when asked what positive experience with Portland you would highlight as an example to follow for future city planning, you said, "Although I'm extremely proud of several projects, the element common to all of them is the wonderful contributions that citizens have made to the planning process." Can you talk about how democratic responsibility in Portland extends beyond the voting booth?
Sure. There's a Harvard sociologist named Robert Putnam who wrote an interesting book about 10, 12 years ago, Bowling Alone, where he talked about how we are not as connected as we used to be. That the title of the book is from the fact that there are more people who bowl than ever before, but fewer people in bowling leagues. So you don't have that organized team effort. That in many cases we find that attendance is down in traditional organizations like a Rotary Club or a Lions Club. What happens in church attendance in many areas. People are not as connected. But he had a second book titled Better Together, where he talked about areas that were bucking the trend. And one of the places he talked about was Portland, because we have a pretty aggressive and robust tradition of people being involved with the civic fabric. I was Portland's Commissioner of Public Works for 10 years and did a lot of things that I'm proud of. The bike program, streetcar, helped expand light rail into a system, did some fascinating land use plans, the central city plans, some neighborhood plans. But the element that I think was most important was being able to engage people to feel that they had a part of that planning process, that they had ownership, that they helped sell it to fellow citizens. And, by the way, that citizen engagement made it better. Portland has an odd form of government. There are only 5 members of the city council, including the mayor, and they all have administrative functions as well as political. So I had the public works portfolio. I found in about 15 minutes after I assumed that portfolio, people figured out that I could influence where a stop sign would go, or the synchronization of the traffic signals. And I found out that anybody with a driver's license was a certified traffic engineer. You know, they knew pretty much everything we were doing was wrong. And after a few months of that, I went ahead and started a class for transportation, just so people could understand the principles and the engagement. And we paid their tuition, we provided instructors, a 10-week class. to solve the biggest transportation problem in their neighborhood. And what was fascinating to me is going back to that class at the end, they actually did figure out how it worked. They still thought everything we did was wrong, but they knew why. They understood the tools, the opportunities, the trade-offs. We've been doing that class now for 25 years, and we have funded dozens of things that citizens figured it out. And for me, that is sort of the hidden secret solution to a lot of the dysfunction at all levels of government. People feel like they are shut out. People are not part of the decision-making process in a constructive way. And we don't do a very good job of helping people understand the facts, like that transportation class. You know, really force people, before they tell me how to solve the problem, they had to hear from the real transportation engineer and the planning director. And so we have a breakdown that occurs now on things like international trade, taxes, environment, where we don't have a very useful conversation about specifics. People get frustrated, they see dysfunction in government, and it creates Trumpism. I mean, that's much too long an answer, but it's what you raise is a very provocative question, and it will underline everything else I talk about here in the next half hour that you have to put up with me. We'll go back to that in terms of how do we reestablish linkage to help people understand the dynamics, give them a role to play in the two-way street that should occur with elected officials.
You are often called, I'm Isaac, by the way. You are often called the man who probably knows the most about how Portland works. Can you talk about what makes your city work so well?
Well, I will pick up where I left off in terms of the citizen engagement. It's really, really important. Part of what has happened in Oregon is that we've been a little more inclined towards big picture, comprehensive, I guess the term some people are using now are moonshots. I mean, we had the first comprehensive statewide land use planning system in the country. Every square inch of Oregon is planned, zoned, and mapped. I had legislation as a child legislator that created an Oregon Transportation Commission and mandated a multimodal, comprehensive, statewide transportation plan. We were the first state with a gas tax for road construction. And we're the pioneering state to get rid of the gas tax and replace it with a road user charge. A lot of this is human scale, trying to make sure that people don't get lost in this process. I think these are things that make a difference. I will say that one of the advantages we have over California, which I love, I mean, I am totally committed to California being the most livable state in the union. We want you to succeed. We want your environment to work. We want transportation to work. In part because California is important, and in part because if California doesn't work, we can't deal with all your refugees. We can't. We can't. California is challenged because you are 10 times, almost 10 times the size of Oregon. You have such diversity and scale that it really makes a lot of your challenges harder. You are like a country. And you got to put up with the United States Congress and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors and everything in between. So that has helped us a little bit because we can experiment because we're bite-sized, not something that's just too big to swallow.
Hi, I'm Isabella.
You're still Isabella.
I am still Isabella, yeah. Part 2. In an interview with Grist, you said, The film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, with a villain that was trying to get rid of streetcars, is one of our movie classics for livability. Could you tell us more about your thoughts regarding the progress of livable communities and the Livable Communities Act?
I use the framework of policies that we call it livable communities, to sort of give a sense of what we're talking about. Actually, communities that work. You know, how do you make a community be a place where families are safe, healthy, and economically secure? How do we focus on things that matter? So much of what people scream about in Congress and on the talk shows on radio or the Sunday morning, Fox News, God, whatever, really is beside the point. In all seriousness, how many lives have been radically disrupted about a transgender person being in a restroom? I mean, I've been in politics 40 years. It has come up exactly 0 times before the last couple months. I would think if it was something that the future of Western civilization depended on, it would have been discussed. Somebody would come up with their idea for bathroom police. I mean, it didn't work out so well when I was in high school, but then it was smoking. Being able to focus on things like whether or not the air is safe to breathe, whether or not children can get to school safely by themselves, whether we are promoting healthy food in our schools and our institutions, and we're protecting people who are involved with farming in the periphery. I mean, these are things that matter. The conditions of our roads and bridges. Being able to have quality education in facilities that are worthy of the name. For me, focusing on things like that relate to whether or not the community provides the support that families need ought to be our focus. And I think the more that that's our focus, 3 things are going to happen. First of all, we're going to find out that there's a lot more agreement than people think. Because if you zero in, not on the slogans, but you zero in on what you want to get out of a farm bill. Actually, most Americans agree with principles that would help California. You get cheated with the Farm Bill. You have the most diverse agricultural system in the country. And a lot of California money goes to subsidize growing cotton in the desert between Phoenix and Tucson. I mean, you go down Highway 10 and there's cotton on both sides of the freeway. Subsidized cotton grown with subsidized water. Well, I mean, we can zero in on things of this nature in terms of what inputs we want. Whether it's agriculture, transportation, education, refinement of the healthcare system. And so my lens is, does it make the community livable? What is it that people want that will make a difference to them and their families? And those are the things that people expect government to do. I don't think they expect people to be inspecting bathrooms and having a birth certificate check. I do think people want to have a local economy that works. They don't want bridges falling down. They would like to have a safe and healthy food supply, that there ought to be opportunities for innovation and development in technology. And those are things that I think people feel government can actually provide some assistance for.
Hi, I'm also Isabella. When
It's
speaking,
convenient.
When speaking about climate change, you said, "It's sad that what should be a straightforward scientific conclusion has become so emotionally charged and politically volatile." If we have the scientific proof of this issue, what is the source of resistance to acknowledging and addressing climate change?
I want to ask you. Can I just divert for a second? Does somebody have some thoughts about that? What do you think the problem is? You've been studying this.
Well, the seniors covered this in their Science with Humanities class, and a lot of it is the belief that while CO2 is a natural gas, though it is a natural gas in the atmosphere, but they think that the excess of it isn't like a legitimate cause, or that they've just been using improper graphs that don't represent the rise in the temperature, or they're saying that climate change has always been there, this is just the natural pattern of the earth. So.
Confusion about the facts?
My name is Sophia, and a lot of us read Dark Money by Jane Mayer, and she talks a lot about the Koch brothers, and there's a lot of talk about climate change and how big corporations care more about profit and will do a lot of corrupt things to avoid, to
Muddy the water?
navigate around that instead of actually addressing climate change.
I think that, first of all, this when it became so deeply partisan, that changed the equation for a number of people, because they have strong political feelings, and if their strong political feelings intersect with scientific evidence, the feelings trump. Oh, I shouldn't use that term. Maybe it's appropriate. It's very interesting. You can find the survey research that suggests that better educated Democrats are more likely to believe the climate science, and better educated Republicans are more likely to be skeptical, because they're smart enough to be able to kind of rearrange the facts to justify sort of an emotional response. Part of it is that we get to the partisan too quickly and don't deal with elements of that we should be exploring, dealing with climate change, that don't have to be quite so ideological. A lot of what we need to do to protect the planet, to reduce carbon emissions, are things we should do even if the climate wasn't changing, that we weren't having the carbon pollution, that we weren't having weather instability. On what planet does it make sense to waste energy? Well, that ought to be a value, conserving it. Being able to get more out of our petroleum resources. They aren't making more of it. Extraction can have problems. And there will be purposes in the future for the petroleum that will be more valuable than just burning it to go from point A to point B. The new innovations that we could have to sell products around the globe for solar, for wind energy. These are things that will make us self-sufficient, will help our military. Delivering a gallon of fuel to the front in Afghanistan cost $300 a gallon. And you might as well just have a big bullseye on the tanker truck, right? More energy efficiency has operational advantages. And I think it goes sideways so quickly, and we do a poor job of being able to, we won't fight this out. People have different perceptions. We ought to acknowledge that and then deal for areas of agreement, deal with scientific consensus, which matters most for young people, and stand up to people who are purposely trying to mislead. I mean, people still believe in the science. What's happened because of part of what our Koch brother friends did, and frankly, some of the large petrochemical companies, is that they have confused the science. So people are confused about what the science is.
Hi, my name is Cece. In an interview with ASLA, you state, "It is key to continue educating people about not only the potential future impacts of climate change and the harm it will cause for children and grandchildren, but also about the impacts we're seeing today. How does one go about changing the thought process of individuals with strong beliefs against climate change?"
I think it's important that we not enter this with the idea that we're going to change people's thought process. As I say, smart people will take that on as a challenge. And actually, it's a lot of fun to examine some of the psychological research about how people attach to opinions and how they keep them, and how lots of times people's own eyewitness accounts aren't accurate, and they can be persuaded. I mean, I think where we start on this is a lot like the earlier comments about citizen infrastructure. I think it's taking a look at things that are happening on the ground. It's hard to argue whether or not California is in the midst of a drought. You have a water problem. Again, we want you to solve it because we want you to be able to thrive in place. Being able to take real-life examples. There's a great book by a fellow named Seth Siegel, and I think everybody in California ought to read this book. It's called Let There Be Water. And what Seth did was produce a book based on the story of Israel over the last century. Went from this little speck in the desert, surrounded by hostile forces. When it started, it wasn't even a nation. And over the course of less than 100 years, has become the most water-rich nation on the planet. I mean, it's not like they're manufacturing more water. But, oops, yes they are. They developed a plan. They have a national policy. Every drop of water that falls in Israel belongs to the government. They are committed to total recycling. Toilet to tap. Being able to purify. They're dealing with desalinization. They've changed how they practiced agriculture. They invented and refined drip agriculture that uses a tiny fraction of what flood agriculture uses, and it actually produces more crops. They price water. There's no free water in Israel. They have a market force so that people pay for it. And that in turn helps foster conservation, helps advance technology, helps pay for desalinization and purification. I mean, it's a virtuous cycle that any of us could do. And I think that's how we're going to get by some of the controversies surrounding energy, climate change, is being able to take some of the nuts and bolts and bring people along with good policies. And actually, water is the one thing that will give us the impact of climate change sooner. You're seeing it already. We have, as a nation, been horribly wasteful and stupid about using water. We use bodies of water as boundaries, which is really good to get cooperation to clean them up. You know, well, it's your side of the river. No, it's yours. We are mining underground water. California does not really know the underground water resources, which you are relying on and you're depleting at a remarkable rate. I think taking nuts and bolts like this and moving forward will really be the sort of the step-by-step that we can change it. It's not that it won't be controversial, but this is an area where we can show results very quickly. This is an area that is not Republican, Democrat, conservative, or liberal. It's how do we get the job done? How does it work? Who's involved? And what results can we show? And I think that's how we build the trust and the momentum.
My name is Carolyn. The Highlander Research and Education Center taught young people the practice of nonviolence. This produced Rosa Parks, who ignited the civil rights era. Do you think that one of the roles of school is to produce citizens who will question assumptions and challenge the dominant societal narratives?
Yes. Absolutely. I serve with John Lewis, who, as a teenager, risked his life, severely beaten, showed amazing courage. But he was part of a movement that included preteens. I mean, you have 12, 13, 14-year-olds who stood up at a time when many adults were nervous.
We're going to see him on the 24th. We have an interview with him.
His life story is just really amazing. But it underscores the power that young people can have. I got started in the political process working on a campaign to lower the voting age. You had to be 21 in 46 of the 50 states. It was fascinating to be involved with that effort to try and encourage young people to take advantage of voting. We were involved with an unpopular and I think a stupid war in Southeast Asia at the time, and they were drafting teenagers to fight in a war where they couldn't vote for the commander-in-chief. I think that's wrong. It frustrates me that, having spent a lot of time working on that in Washington, D.C. and in Oregon, and the stakes are so high for young people. I mean, if we have another war, the war that we have now, how many geezer baby boomers are fighting in that? You know, it is young people, teenage, 20s, who bear that burden. And if the air is polluted and climate change screws up the amazing impacts in terms of extreme weather events, you and your peers are going to put up with it a lot longer than old members of Congress. I mean, you have the greatest stake. And I just checked the numbers, this is election day in Oregon, and we have an election day that's 440 hours long. It's all mail-in. And we're into the last 24 hours, that 440 hours. And the turnout rate for voters under 35 was like 15%. Really? And for geezers 50 and over, it was 60%. What do we think that will make any difference in terms of how they vote on school measures or you name it? And what's more important is that if not having young people vote makes it less likely that people are going to be listening as closely as they should to your concerns. And it's why we spend 7 times as much on senior citizens as we do kids under 5.
Hi, my name is Max. And in a 2003 article for the Portland Communique, you said, "I'm absolutely convinced that in the course of the next 10 years, we have an amazing chance to reverse the direction of this country. To what extent have we been successful in doing so, and where have we failed?"
Well, we've done a great job of reversing the course of this country. Then we went back around. You know, I do think there was a significant repudiation of what I think was a very reckless foreign policy of the Bush administration. I mean, I was passionately opposed to the war in Iraq. I think it was the biggest foreign policy blunder of a generation, maybe of all time. And you're going to be paying the price for that as we just shattered the Middle East. A Middle East, by the way, that was, this is the 100th anniversary of the Sykes-Picot map of the Middle East, where people drew straight lines to chop up post-World War I Middle East, creating countries that never existed before, Iraq, Syria. And we did. I mean, it caught up with them. I think the election of Barack Obama was very significant on a number of levels. Having in a country that still has as much racial tension and inequity as the United States, to have an African American elected president, I think is very significant, and we will, and the consequences are going to ripple. But it was also fascinating for me to look at the backlash when we had the near meltdown of the economy, and people had some real difficulty understanding. They were reacting, and lots of times there were efforts here to blame poor people, to excuse me, you know, the cowboys on Wall Street didn't actually get much of the blame, and we made really, we were only able to make halfway measures for the economic recovery. Obama, to his credit, took them on, dealt with health care, which is significant, and there are, you know, almost 20 million more people who have health care now than had it before. But nobody, I think, would have anticipated that there would be complete 100% opposition from the Republicans. Not a single Republican was willing to help that. And so we weren't able to refine it. The animosity towards President Obama is really hard to overstate, and it fed on itself. So we kind of made some great change. I think history will regard what Obama did in his first 2 years in office, when we were losing 700,000 jobs a month, when we did almost have a complete economic meltdown, when people lost 50%, 70% of their net worth, and we almost lost the auto industry. I mean, there were things there. History, I think, is going to treat him favorably. But the intransigence of the political class and how divisive, you remember the leader of the Republicans in the Senate said his #1 priority in the aftermath of what was going on in the Middle East, climate change, near collapse of the economy, his #1 priority was to make sure that Obama was a one-term president. I mean, that's pretty staggering. I mean, you didn't see that in the middle of the Depression. You didn't see it during World War II with Roosevelt. And it's a heightened partisanship that makes me wonder, you know, have we come full cycle? I think we did great things early after 2003. We kind of drew some of this back. I think we have a better appreciation of some of the limitations. We did good things with the economy. Part of it is the media that we have today. The media that we have today, so much of it is what's happening with 140 character tweets, stuff that comes via the internet. There's no context. I mean, anybody can say anything, and we've had all sorts of really stupid things go viral that have no basis in fact that become stories. We've turned politics into reality TV. And it's something that we all are going to have to come to grips with, because there is a room for substance. How you get things done matters. If you are a lying weasel, that undercuts credibility and the ability to get things done. If you can't work with people in either party in Congress, it's a challenge. It is deeply troubling to me that it's so hard to engage people with substance, which is why I deal with lots of simple-minded little things that I think people can understand and we can make progress. Bike partisanship. I've got 30 things. I can go to any community in the country, get 100 or 200 people to turn out, and we can talk about things that'll make a difference right there for families. Stopping the insane war on drugs that we have. I've been working on drug reform. We've spent $1 trillion on a war on drugs, and 60 years later, drugs are every bit as available, maybe more, in terms of heroin, cocaine. Meth is now a new scourge. We have put African American men in jail at a rate 2, 3, 4, 6 times. In Louisiana, one place it's 17 times. Being able to take things like reforming marijuana, reforming transportation, animal welfare. These are things that people can understand and care about. And taking things that we can make a difference, that don't divide people, but bring them together and make progress. Today, 155 million hours is going to be spent by poor women and girls getting water for their families in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. And often the water that they get will make the families sick. Dealing with international water and sanitation is something that we can do that will make a difference and brings people together. And I think we need to be focusing more on things that we can agree on and deliver to try and change that dynamic, instead of arguing about things that government can't do anything about, and in some cases shouldn't. But if I had any answers, I'd be bottling it and selling it. I mean...
Hi, I'm Alex. What do you think the most important work for our generation will be, and do you have any advice for us as we move forward toward our responsibilities as citizens?
Well, I think the most important work for any of you individually is to be able to identify your passion and follow through. I mean, whether it is teaching or it is neuroscience or helping to rebuild and renew America, having something that really you care about, that you take pride in, that will make the world a little better. It doesn't have to be saving the world, but people who assume their role in terms of family, community, the economy are playing a critical role. People who are responsible voters, spending a little bit of time on citizenship. I mean, those are the things that matter more than anything else. I mean, I'm sure there's some Nobel Prize winner lurking here around the room, and there are great things in mathematics or the arts, but the more that we have people who identify something that they want to do, that they're passionate about, they can develop their skill set, that they can have some sort of professional pride in whatever it is, and that supports them as being a functioning member of the broader community. I think we're all better off. And I can argue all sorts of different things that you should consider. Because as you can tell from the nature of the conversation we've had already, I'm involved with lots of obscure issues that you'll never hear about on Fox News. So I'm easily distracted by things that seem important to me, and I can rationalize trying to make sense out of it. But that focus, that thing that helps you feel good about the contributions you're making and to be able to be a base of support for your family and friends and making a difference in the community is the most important thing that can be done. And there are any number of paths to take it.
Can you guys say anything, just take a couple, what struck you about what you've heard? Because I know the congressman has to leave, but what's touched you from what you heard?
I like how you talked about involving citizens more in politics, and especially like younger generations and what's going on, and like really getting us to help make the change that needs to be made.
You guys feel like you would be included if you lived in his district? Yeah, okay.
I thought it was very striking how you emphasize things that actually matter and taking care of things that we can actually do something about as a community on a smaller scale to affect greater change on people overall. I thought that was very inspiring, and yeah.
One thing that really struck me was you really put a focus on like the juxtaposition of how, although like youth in the young generation should be the ones who really drive change, but kind of ironically, we're the ones that are pushing for the least amount of reform right now. Especially, you pointed out 15% of people in 18 to 30 were coming to the polls, which is pretty bad.
I like what you said about how we make a difference in a bite-sized, focused way. It makes making a difference seem a lot more like you can grasp it rather than this big, abstract impossibility, sort of.
Just one, it's not to say that people shouldn't dream big and think big picture. It's just, I guess I'm saying that I think sometimes the quickest way to get to the big picture is to be able to boil it down to deal with things that aren't quite so abstract.
I'm so happy that you took time. I think this group, especially given where we're from, which is Senators, is raised in an atmosphere where a lot of the policies you're talking about and things you care about are the things that we care about there as well. And I think it's very reassuring and encouraging to us to know that you're doing what you're doing. And we're going to try to do it better in our state so we don't have to move to your state and look about it. But thank you, really, this means a lot to us.
Well, we appreciate the very thoughtful way you've gone about this interaction. I mean, clearly you've done a lot of thinking and studying and throwing things back at me from my distant past. And I must say, Congressman Farr on occasion has given me a pass so I can come down. We've done some events. I mean, it's a lovely part of California, and you have a few people with strong opinions. So I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation. I guess we're not going to let Sam off the hook altogether, and look forward to working with you as some of these items develop, because we West Coasters are in it together. And I think there are some commonalities in terms of values and problems, and that together we can have sort of the West Coast bulwark to be able to spread a little bit of sanity, and we still try and keep Portland weird, and I don't know about Santa Cruz. But